Okay, today we are going to continue reading Am I Blue? Coming up from the silence. This one is Parents' Night by Nancy Garden. Inscribed, with thanks and cheers to the schools that have gay, straight, bisexual support groups, and in hopes that all schools will soon have them. This book was published in 1993. This year, my dad didn't give me a rose on my birthday. When I was born, he sent Mom yellow sweetheart roses and had the florist put one in a separate vase for me. Every year after that, he gave me yellow sweetheart roses on my birthday, and when my sister, Josie, was born, he did the same for her, only with carnations. He kept on with my rose, too, even though by then I'd begun refusing to wear the frilly pink dresses he liked, with spotless white tights and old-fashioned pink hair ribbons. Hair ribbons? My girlfriend Roxy shrieked when I told her. Oh God, hair ribbons? She laughed so hard that pretty soon she got me laughing, too. Roxy's like that, happy, infectiously cheerful. Come on, I said, grabbing her. Don't you ever have to wear hair ribbons? No, Karen, she said. I didn't. I had to wear blue berets. Barrettes. Barrettes, I shouted. The way she'd said hair ribbons. I started to laugh, but then she kissed me, and for a long time we didn't talk anymore. That was in September, when we'd just come back from a summer vacation away from each other. We were drunk with love, high with it. We still are, but it was extra special at first, when we weren't worried about anyone, especially my dad finding out. Schools? Ours isn't perfect, but there's this group out there called the Gay-Straight-Bisexual Alliance, which we'd both joined only a few months after Roxy'd come to our school that January. One day in March, when I still hadn't figured out I was gay, my friend Abner, and I were talking about a dance everyone was going to. The last thing I want to do is prance around with some stupid boy and pretend I like him, I said. And Ab said, You really do like girls better than boys, don't you, Karen? It hit me then that I always had, and that I wouldn't mind at all dancing with the girl. Ab remarked very softly, We're two of a kind then. I like boys better than girls, you know, that way, sexually, to be in love with. Right away, a picture of Roxy jumped into my mind, with her wavy red-gold hair and deep sea-green eyes, and her wonderfully gentle hands. As soon as that happened, I said, Oh, wow. Ab looked at me with the sort of sideways grin he always has. I'm gay, Karen, he said, and I'm in that new group, the Gay-Straight-Bisexual Alliance. It's pretty good. Maybe you should come to a meeting. A bunch of us are going to the dance. We're probably going to dance with each other. Want to come? No, I said, because I wasn't sure if Ab was right about me, but then he told me most of the kids in the group weren't sure about themselves either. I still wasn't completely convinced, but I decided to go to the dance. Luckily, Roxy was there. When I first saw her, I was dancing with Ab, but when I noticed she was looking my way, I muttered, See ya, to him, and danced over to this girl, Anne, who he'd introduced me to. She was in GSBA, and she was more or less dancing alone. I made a big point of relating to her. No, I don't know where I got the nerve. All the time I was grinning at Anne, I was praying, Notice, Roxy, notice. Notice that I like girls. Somehow I forgot that might disgust her. Dumb, right? But a couple of straight girls were dancing alone or with each other too, and none of the straight kids seemed to notice the GSBA kids much. Well, one guy yelled, Faggot, a couple times, but a teacher threw him out. I didn't really think Roxy saw me, but a little later, when I was getting a Coke, she came up to me. I got all sweaty when I saw her heading for me, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to think of a thing to say. but she just smiled and said, "You look great dancing. Is it true no one minds if girls dance with girls at this school?" "Well, I stammered. Eloquent, right? Sometimes. I mean, I don't really know. This is the first dance I've been to here, but it looks like no one minds, doesn't it?" Roxy laughed her infectious laugh. "Yes." And she actually took my hand. "It does look like that. I don't see any boys dancing together, though. I'm glad we're not boys, aren't you?" I gulped and said, "Yeah." And we danced. We went on dancing together the whole night, and I almost didn't notice when Ab sailed by and mouthed "lucky" at me. Well, that's how I got to know Roxy. We had one lunch period a week at the same time, and we had a couple classes down the hall from each other. And of course, there was after school. We both went out for the same sports, not because we both liked the same ones, but so we could be together. We left notes in each other's lockers. And pretty soon we were so close we almost breathed the same breath. I knew what she was going to say before she said it, and she knew what I was thinking. We didn't always agree, so we argued a lot, but we always ended up laughing and then learning from each other. We still do. We both joined GSBA, and pretty soon the other kids there began calling us the Lovebirds. Without really saying anything about it, suddenly we, plus Ab, were the only kids in the group who were sure enough we were gay to be out. Out in the group, that is, not to our teachers or kids outside GBSA, as Ab was, not out to straight friends, not out to siblings, and especially not out to parents. In September, after school started again, Dad kept saying I should make other friends, and Mom kept asking me about boys. Finally, Mac, who's the faculty advisor to GSBA, said, "Karen, your parents aren't going to get off your case unless you explain things to them." I'd been complaining about how hard it was for me to pretend to my parents that Roxy and I were just ordinary best friends. I'd told them Ab was my boyfriend, and Mom had been urging me to get him to fix Roxy up with someone so we could go out together as two couples instead of as a threesome, which is what we usually did. It isn't fair to Roxy, dear. Think of how you'd feel if she had a boyfriend and you didn't. Mom's a social worker, and she prides herself on understanding what goes on inside people. "Don't you want Roxy to have a boyfriend?" she asked. "Doesn't Roxy want one?" I wanted to scream, "No!" but I had to say yes to both questions. I muttered something about Roxy's being shy, and Mom said we'd have to help her get over that, and how about giving a nice little party? "She's a social worker, Karen," Max said when I told the group. "She must know something about homosexuality." Roxy reached for my hand. "Knowing and accepting aren't the same thing. You should see her, Mac. She spends 2 hours a week at the beauty parlor, and she buys all her clothes at Lord & Taylor. And when she meets a woman friend, she sticks her cheek against her friend's and her butt out behind. God forbid she should touch another woman's body." And she and the other woman kissed the air. "I love it," Ab chortled. He grabbed the hand of a guy named Jonathan who sat next to him, and they stood up and demonstrated perfectly. Everyone laughed, and we went on to something else, but at the end of the meeting, Max said, "I have an announcement," and we all got serious again because Mac's rarely that formal. He's the only teacher in the whole school who's out, which must take incredible guts, and he started GSBA, so to us, he's pretty much of a hero. He was usually so upbeat that the solemn face he put on them made me afraid that he was going to tell us he was HIV positive or something. But all he said was, "Okay, gang, you probably know Parents' Night is coming up." We all groaned, which is the usual thing kids in our school do when someone mentions Parent Night. Showtime, Ab calls it. It's bad enough to have to clear out the desks and lockers and make sure there's evidence of exciting, meaningful projects in the classrooms, and only great-looking artwork on the walls. But there are also parent-teacher conferences, and some kids have to serve as guides and escort the parents around the school. Mac held up his hand. I know, he said sympathetically, but the gimmick this year is that the gym's going to be set up with booths for all the student organizations and clubs, and I thought we should have one too. There was a stunned silence. No one said anything for a while, but finally Anne, the girl who I'd danced with when I was trying to get Roxy's attention, said, "What's supposed to be in the booth?" "A couple of members from the organization and something to show what the organization does," Mac answered. "The drama club will have programs of past shows, that sort of thing." "We could put out those book lists you've been giving us," said Roxy. "And the lists of gay organizations in the city," said Anne. "And AIDS stuff," Ab suggested. Jonathan grinned. "Hey, we could hand out condoms." "Don't think that didn't occur to me," said Mac. "But I have a funny feeling that might not go over big with some of the parents. Last thing we want to do is antagonize anyone." "But AIDS stuff is a good idea," said Roxy. "The lists too, of course." "Good," Mac said. "Any volunteers?" he asked casually, "for sitting in the booth?" "You," said 2 or 3 people at once. "I'll be there," said Mac, "or nearby, but the point is for the parents to see what the kids are doing. I know what I'm asking," he added. "Believe me, I know." "It should be someone who's out," the girl next to Anne said. All eyes went to Ab, and then to Roxy and me. "Not necessarily," said Mac. "Remember, our big point has always been that no one has to be out or sure of their sexual orientation." "Yeah," I pointed out, "but most kids figure we're all gay, and the parents probably will too. You know what people are like." "Yes," Max said, "I know." Everyone was still looking at the 3 of us. Ab shook his head. "My dad would throw me out of the house. I know he's coming to parents' night. I'm sorry, I'd really like to do it, but I can't." "You mean you're not out to your folks?" asked one of the other boys. "Geez, you're out to everyone in this whole school." I know, but at home I'm a master of subterfuge." Ab gave a little bow, and we all laughed, but uncomfortably. "That leaves us," I said to Roxy. "But we're not out to our parents either," I said to everyone. "No one has to make a decision now," Mac told us. "But do think about it, everyone, and remember, it really doesn't have to be anyone who's out or anyone who's sure of their sexuality." "But no one who's not sure is going to dare," Roxy said later up in my room. My parents were still at work. She hesitated. "My dad's got one of his trips that week, I think, and Mom's going with him." Roxy's dad was in the travel business, and she and her older sister often had to stay alone. "Lucky? I'm not absolutely sure yet," smiled Roxy bravely. "But look, if I have to do it, be in the booth alone, I mean, it's okay. Maybe it would be better." "I can't let you do that," I said. "God knows how people are going to react." "Mac will be there." She kissed me. "Don't worry." I kissed her back, deciding quickly, "I'll be there too." But how? I asked myself after she left. Am I going to tell my folks? I knew I couldn't suddenly appear in the booth without warning them. I went over lots of scenes in my mind, starting with the one where I come down to dinner and say, "Mom, Dad, Josie, I've got something to tell you. I'm gay. I'm a lesbian." Whereupon Mom throws her hands up to her face and bursts into tears, and Josie looks at me like I've just grown another head, and Dad shoves his chair back and says, "I'm going out." And ending with the one where I say quietly on Sunday while we're all reading the paper, "By the way, I'm going to be in one of the student organization booths on Parents' Night." And Mom says cheerfully, "That's nice, dear. Which one?" And I say, "GSBA." And Dad says, "What in blazes is that?" I say, "Gay-Straight-Bisexual Alliance." And they all stare at me like I have 2 heads. Mom says, "Do you think that's wise, dear?" And at the same time, Josie says, gays and homosexual? Dad bellows, I don't want any daughter of mine mixed up with a bunch of queers. You want to do social work, you go to school for it like your mother. Then we'll talk about it. But as it turned out, I didn't have to play any of the scenes I imagined. 3 nights later, at dinner, Mom said, I had to turn down 2 more cases today. I really wish my supervisor would get it through her head that I just can't handle AIDS cases. Now, this wasn't a new topic. Mom's okay as a social worker, I guess, but she developed this one serious blind spot. She refused to handle AIDS cases ever since her supervisor first tried to give her one, saying she was trying to protect our family's health. This had started back before I knew much about AIDS. Later, when I knew more, I made a feeble attempt at telling her she couldn't catch AIDS unless she slept with her clients, or got their body fluids in a cut or something, but she just said, medical science isn't infallible. There's a lot people still don't know. I can't risk your health. After that, I'd given up. But tonight, since all I'd been thinking about was that darn booth and how sick I was from hiding from my parents anyways, I just fell apart. I tried to be calm at first. Who gets the AIDS cases you give up? I asked her. I could hear my voice sounded funny, and I guess everyone else did too, because Mom, Dad, and Josie all stopped eating and stared at me. Why, I don't know, said Mom, but they do get reassigned, eventually. Oh, great, I said sarcastically, and until they do, some poor guy languishes in his rented room, too weak to go out and get food or cash his welfare check or whatever. Mom and Dad looked at each other. Karen, he said to me, your mother's a very good social worker. She's also a very good mother, and she told you before why she won't take AIDS cases. You should be grateful. I laughed. Isn't that just a little bit hypocritical? I mean, I went on, turning to her, if you really believe you're going to catch it, aren't you condemning some other social worker and her family to certain death by letting the cases be reassigned? Mom looked startled, and then I swear turned pale. I know the risk isn't great, Karen, she said evenly, but I could hear that she was furious, and I believe most of the social workers who accept AIDS cases don't have families. Some even volunteer. I just happen to prefer working with normal people who need social workers through no fault of their own. Then I really exploded. I could feel it coming, but there wasn't any way to stop it. Fault of their own? I yelled. Normal people? God, how unfair! What you're really saying is that if my gay brothers and sisters get AIDS, it's their fault and they deserve to get sick. There was a deadly silence. I mean deadly. The kind that chokes you. I thought it wasn't just gay people, Josie said, looking around anxiously. They said in health class that it's drug addicts using dirty needles and people not using condoms. And you don't have to be gay, Karen. Normal people can get it too, and kids can, and people have gotten it from bad blood transfusions, and... What do you mean, your gay brothers and sisters? Dad boomed, ignoring Josie. Suddenly, I was freezing cold, and my heart was beating so hard I felt dizzy. I took a deep breath and looked Dad straight in the eye. I mean, I'm gay too, I said as calmly as I could. I didn't want to tell you this way, yelling it, and I'm so sorry I did, but I'm tired of hiding. I'm a lesbian, and Roxy and we're not just friends like you think. That's enough, my father snapped. Josie, please go to your room. But Daddy... Do what your father says, Mom ordered. She'd sort of moaned when I said the word lesbian, and now I could see that she was fighting tears. I got up and tried to put my arms around her, but she pulled away. I'm sorry, I said, going back to my chair. I'm sorry, but that's how it is, how I am. I can't do anything about it. I don't want to. I never fit in before, because I didn't know where I belonged or what made me different. Now I do, and I wanted you to know. I'm in this group at school. I told them about Parents' Night in the booth and how Roxy and I were going to be working in it. But when I'd finished, my father got up from the table, looked at me coldly, and thundered, "You are not going to be in that booth, and you are going to drop out of that organization. If I have to take you out of that school and send you to another, I will." He stormed out of the room. My mother let go of her tears and followed him. I didn't drop out of GSBA, and luckily my parents didn't mention it again. 2 days later was my birthday, and we had the usual family party with cake and ice cream and presents. My parents had been pretty strained and distant, but they went ahead with all the traditional stuff as if nothing had happened, singing Happy Birthday and marching in with the presents and the blazing cake. I oohed and ahed, and there was a certain amount of false laughter, but there was no yellow sweetheart rose from Dad, and he was the most strained and quietest of all of us. You better believe I noticed, and after dinner I went to my room and cried. Time went on, and things slowly settled down on the surface, except I noticed a list of names near the phone one day that I figured might be psychiatrists, and I almost threw it away. No one said anything about it, though, so I didn't. Then, one Saturday, a couple weeks later, Dad went fishing with a friend of his at some ungodly hour like 5 a.m. Josie slept late, so I had Mom to myself when I went down for breakfast. She said, "Good morning," cheerfully, and made us both bacon and eggs, and we talked about the weather and how many fish Dad might or might not catch. But when she started on her second cup of coffee, she said, awkwardly, "Karen, I'm sorry about the argument." "I am too," I said. "I'm sorry I attacked you. I don't agree with you about AIDS, and it's something that matters to me, but I guess you have a right to your opinion." "Maybe I don't," she said. "If my opinion is wrong. I've been doing some reading, and I'm a little ashamed of myself. I think I've lost sight of why I became a social worker in the first place. I've always been uncomfortable, I guess you could say, about homosexuality, but there are parents' groups," I told her tentatively. "Yes," she said with an embarrassed smile. "I know, parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. I've talked with a very nice woman several times. She's helped a lot. Karen, I'd rather you weren't gay, and I don't quite believe you are. You're so very young. But if you are, if you turn out to be, I want you to know that I still love you, and I'll do my best to support you. I like Roxy," she added shyly, "and I'm glad you've got her." "Me too," I said, and then carefully I asked, "Are you and Dad coming to Parents' Night?" "I am, and I've been trying to get Dad to come too. Are you going to do that booth?" I took in a deep breath. "Yes," I said, "with Roxy." Her lips tightened, but she nodded and finished her coffee. By the time Parents' Night came, though, I still didn't know if Dad was coming. He'd caught several big trout on his fishing expedition, and we'd had them for dinner that night, rolled in oatmeal and fried the way he liked them. I helped Mom cook them, and he seemed pleased at that. He wasn't really hostile anymore, but I kept catching him looking at me like I was some stranger. A couple of times I wanted to say, "Hey, Dad, I'm still the same person I always was. It's just that you know me better now." But I didn't dare. The night before Parents' Night, I had a bad case of nervousness when Roxy and I, and the other kids, set up our booth. Some of the straight kids looked at us kind of funny, but I guess Max being there kept them from saying anything. When we got back to the gym that night, though, a while before the parents were due, someone had painted "faggots and dykes" over the word "Gay-Straight-Bisexual" on our sign. "Ignorant bastards," Mac muttered, and Ab, who'd brought the AIDS literature, said, "I'll fix that," and he ran off to the art room. By the time the doors to the gym opened and the parents started coming in, the sign said the right thing again. "Are you as nervous as I am?" I whispered to Roxy when Ab had left. She nodded, and Mac pretended his hands were shaking, and his head and his whole body, and that made us laugh. A few minutes later, the principal came up and said, "You folks get the prize for bravery. Good luck, and let me know if there's any problem." That was pretty nice. There wasn't much of any problem. A few parents came up, sort of hesitantly, like they were surprised or embarrassed, and that made me feel less scared. One or two walked by, grinning or giggling as if we were aliens or something, and one man stopped in front of the booth, shaking his head and saying, "I don't believe this, I don't believe this," over and over. But no one paid much attention to him. Lots of people took AIDS literature. A couple of people said they were glad we were there, and a few people took the book and organization list. And then I didn't see much else, because I spotted my parents coming into the gym. Right, my parents, plural. My mom was smiling bravely, and hanging on to Dad's arm as if she were trying to show the world he belonged to her, and they were a happy, well-adjusted couple. Well, okay. I figured I'd do that sort of thing too with Roxy, if I could. Dad's left arm, the one that wasn't linked with Mom's, was behind his back. Without glancing at any of the other booths, he led her right up to ours. Talk about cold sweats. As I put as much of a smile on my face as I could, and started to say, "Hi, thanks for coming." Dad looked very embarrassed, and as nervous as I felt. He sort of scanned the gym as if he were scanning for people he knew, and he gave Mom a desperate look. She nodded in a stiff kind of way, and Dad bent down awkwardly, so his head was sort of inside the booth, and he kissed me. Then he took his other arm from behind his back and handed me a yellow sweetheart rose. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he whispered. "I'm a little late with this, but I promise I won't be again. I've got a lot to get used to, but, well, you're still my daughter. I just need some time." He smiled, a little crookedly, but hey, it was still a smile. I couldn't move, and I felt tears well up in my eyes. While I was still trying to figure out what to say and how to keep from blubbering all over the booth, Dad reached over to Roxy and gave her shoulder a clumsy pat. "I'm glad to know you and Karen care for each other," he said awkwardly. He looked around the booth and picked up the lists and some AIDS pamphlets. He handed the AIDS stuff to Mom, winked at me, and then they walked off, heading for the next booth. And I stood there, with tears spilling over, and Roxy gripping my hand till Matt gave me a handkerchief, and Roxy whispered, "Hey, crying's bad for business," and we went back to work.